they were all experiencing the same problem. So they get together, and of course, this veterinarian and the university can't do anything in Iowa without Iowa State, you know. The university comes out and they investigate and they test this, they test that, and they can't find a plausible cause, but they know for a fact it's not that corn. Because all these farmers that read the story about his problem got together and had a meeting, and lo and behold, guess what? They were all feeding the exact same BT corn. When they quit feeding it, it went away. But the university said it cannot be connected. In our area, we saw ileitis, salmonella, bloody bowel ulcers prevalent in the postmortem of pigs that were suffering from various scour disease. Back to the part about why the insertion process is critical. I have been blessed to be mentored by so many amazing scientists along this journey that the good Lord put me on. And Dr. Arpad Pusztai is the first scientist in the world to ever do a true scientific study on GMOs. For the sake of time, I won't go into the in-depth explanation of it, but I will tell you, he believed it was going to be a positive. He looked at BT as a good thing. We use less insecticide. He was so appalled at the results of his study. It was unbelievable and astronomical. I reached out to him in 2003. I was searching online and I come across an email address and I sent it to him, and in 2.5 hours I had a response. And it was just a godsend in unmentionable ways. He was the poster child for the most efficient research ever conducted. He was the poster child for what researchers never want to do, commit suicide for their career. Because he was destroyed after he did an honest interview with a radio program. They asked him, and he didn't divulge the results of the study because it hadn't been published yet, but they asked him 3 questions and he answered them honestly. And he had permission from his supervisor to do this interview, and he did not divulge the results of the study. But the questions they asked him, he says, well, would you eat it? He said, absolutely not. Well, what's your opinion of it? I think it's unfair to use the population as guinea pigs in this untested product that's going into the food supply. And he was a hero locally for 10 days, 2 weeks. And then a call went from St. Louis to the White House to President Clinton, and then he called Tony Blair in the UK, and just like that, Arpad was destroyed. He lost all of his funding, he lost all of his personnel, and he was done. He finished out the term of his contract at the Roe Institute, basically in a closet. So there was not anybody going to follow in his footsteps to do a sound study again. But anyway, he proved, or he believed, that when you do the genetic manipulation, he told me, he said, Howard, it doesn't matter what they insert. People have said, well, the BT's causing the problem, or it's the glyphosate gene causing the problem, or it's this causing the problem, or it's that causing the problem. He said, no. He said, it's the insertion process. He worked with potatoes, the regular potato and the BT potato, and he had fed the BT to the rats. It didn't affect them at all. The natural BT did not affect the rats. He said, here's 2 potatoes, they're identical. I'm going to take a gene out of this one and insert it in this one, and it's already here, so it's not foreign. It's the process of the insertion that causes the disruption that messes up the whole genetic makeup, that causes the 90+% potential of the development of the foreign protein. Okay, 70 to 80% of the cells of our immune system are in our digestive tract. I use this picture to depict what happens when a mammal, 2-legged, 4-legged, anything in between, consumes a foreign protein from a genetically engineered crop. The immune system identifies this as foreign and it goes into overdrive. Its job is to protect the host. So imagine you're pushing against that wall 24/7, 365. You're the immune system. and you're trying to get rid of this foreign protein. The brick wall is the foreign protein. If I push against this wall for 24 hours and you come back, what's going to happen to my strength? Is there an increase in autoimmune issues in your country like there is in ours? 70 to 85% of the processed foods in the grocery store contain foreign proteins from genetically engineered crops. That brings me to a point in time where I took a tour of a hog slaughter plant. Dr. McGuire was the veterinarian that gave me the tour of the plant. Dr. Newman was the veterinarian that I was privileged to work for 8 years early in my farming career. That was called survival. I had 5 jobs in addition to farming because I started farming the wrong year, 1981. But anyway, we had seen these problems with pig stomachs over time with the genetically engineered crops. So I toured the hog slaughter plant. This is the stomach of a non-GMO fed pig. And if you're squeamish, just look down. If you pass out, I know CPR, so don't worry. Notice the skin tone color of the stomach. That's what it's supposed to look like. The yellow it's just mucus because there's nothing there to digest. The enzymes are productive. This is a GMO fed, I gotta back up. This is a drug-free hog eating non-GMO feed. This is a GMO fed hog on a drug-free program. So is this stomach. And you can see the inflammation and the redness and some ulcers. This is a hog that was fed antibiotics the bulk of his life and consumed GMOs. You can see the ulcer in the middle is healed over, and you can see that the antibiotic helped reduce the inflammation and thus the redness is not present. This is the worst stomach I ever took a picture of a GM-fed, antibiotic-fed hog. I remember the first time I showed this presentation to a group of farmers in South Dakota. There was a nutritionist from the local co-op in the back room. There's no way that hog should be alive. I said, don't worry, it's not. I called this circumstantial coincidental information. I took Dr. Elaine Ingham's classes in 2008. I shared with her what we were seeing. She said, Howard, this is anecdotal evidence. Now set up the scientific study and see if you can prove your point. I was fortunate to connect with Dr. Judy Carmen from Australia, who is the head scientist. We took 84 pigs in this group and 84 pigs in this group right off of mama when they were weaned. They were weighed, they were randomly separated, they were sexed. We drew a number out of the hat, who's going to get fed what, and they ate GMO corn and soy, non-GMO corn and soy, same everything else, same premix, same ration, all the way to harvest. Dr. Pustai, when I gave him the protocol of the study, he said, this looks good, but you need to weigh the hogs every week. I said, well, we're going to weigh them in the nursery, we'll weigh them out of the nursery, and we'll weigh them when we're finished. No, you need to weigh them every week. I said, that's a lot of work. He said, I don't care. If you don't weigh them every week, you don't know if they quit growing. I said, well, we can see that. He said, you will weigh them every week. Okay, we weigh them every week, and you'll see why I bring that up shortly. This is Dr. Robinson inspecting a pig study, and Dr. Carmen is recording the results. This is a non-GM fed pig stomach, and again, this was a drug-free trial. This is a GMO fed pig stomach. So the statistical results of the study, the pigs that consumed the GMO corn and soy had a 260% increased likelihood of severe inflammation in the stomach. The males had a 400% increase, and the females a 220% increase. The GM-fed female, we weighed all the organs. The weight of the utera of the GM-fed female was 25% abnormally heavy, so it was enlarged. We did not have the money to do the histological analysis of the stomachs or the uterus, so we didn't go forward with that. But remember what I said, the farmers had problems with digestive issues and reproductive issues before we did this study? Did we find 2 body parts that could be connected to digestion or reproduction as far as being affected by the GMO feed? This is the part that we didn't expect. And because I was very green in science, And of course, I didn't know about it right away either, because we had separation walls, and the pigs were actually finished in South Dakota. They were weighing them every week. This is the simple maze that they used to weigh them in. And the pigs were always in the same pen every week. They weighed this group, put them back, weighed the next group, put them back, so on and so forth. A, B, C, D was the way they were marked. Well, we didn't anticipate this, so we couldn't record the happenings, but here's what happened. The pigs that were in pen A and pen B went through this simple maze easily and with a lot less time than the pigs in pen C and pen D. In fact, the pigs in pen A and B, they thought this was playtime. We'd go up and we'd go through that silly little maze, and we'd get on that jiggly thing, and then we get to run around and kick up our heels, and then they finally lock us up again. C and D, every week, where do I go? I can't get through. How do I get out of this stupid maze? And as soon as you get them in confined quarters, they start fighting and biting and picking on one another. When they're back in their normal pen, they just exhibit a level of listlessness or lack of contentment. Dr. Carmen went on to do a study in rats with both GM soy and GM corn and looked at behavioral differences. And the study's not been published, so I can't tell you the results. But I'm going to ask a question. In 1996, before 85% of the processed foods in the grocery store, in our country and yours, how many people did you know of in 1996 that were on mood-altering medication for ADD, ADHD, or similar type symptoms, compared to what it is today when over 85% of the processed foods in the grocery store do contain ingredients from GMOs? And then add to that the potential of glyphosate residue in the example that Dr. Duttmeyer used for horses. That will have when I get to the end of the presentation, that may have a significant resonance with you. So I'm going to touch briefly on glyphosate, because Dr. Huber did an excellent job of telling you the characteristics. I'm going to look more at residue. And the U.S. Geological Service did a study in Iowa and Mississippi. They tested the air and the rain and the river. Guess what? They found glyphosate residue in the air, in the rain, and in the river. Of course, the rest of the states were okay because they didn't look there. The amount of glyphosate in 1 inch of rain was 0.48 grams. You remember how little Dr. Huber told you it took to do the chelation and the tying up of the nutrients? Don't take very much. We have found glyphosate residue, and this was in the early days, not today where it's hot and heavy and everywhere. It was found in alfalfa, barley. The one company that made the PCR test, their business went in about 2010, because guess what? What do they use most of the barley for? Make beer, right? Can you make beer when you have a component in the barley that kills the beneficial organisms you need for fermentation? So this company that had made these strip tests, their business went foo, because everybody that's buying barley wanted these strip tests done, and then guess what? They wouldn't take any barley that had glyphosate residue in it because they couldn't make it into beer. In the manure, the CAFO manure from 0.24 parts per billion to 1.51, 3 ton of poultry litter, free of charge. On average, you're going to get 2/3 a quart of Roundup, in essence, between the glyphosate and the AMPA residues in there. Just for your information, say AMPA is short for aminomethylphosphonic acid. That's the first metabolite that glyphosate degrades to as it starts to break down on this side of the pathway. Additional glyphosate residue issues. EPA in 1994 said 2 parts per million per day per life wasn't going to hurt anybody. You can't find that on the internet anymore, by the way. 1997, they changed it from 0.10 ppm to 20, or they increased it 20,000%. Now it's 40 ppm. We can't find any science that justifies the increase. We suspect that maybe it was the residues that were being found, so in order to be able to sell this stuff that's being produced, you better get the residue up a little higher. That's speculation. Infertility affecting both the sperm and the egg has been documented in the Seralini study by 0.5 ppm. the endocrine disruption 0.2, 2.0, just endocrine disruption to a developing fetus in the room, in the womb, it spells birth defects, to an adult, abnormal formation of cells. What do they call abnormal formation of cells caused by endocrine disruption? If you have cells forming that are abnormal in your body, what do they call that clump? Tumor, correct? 1/10 of a part per billion in the drinking water of the Seralini study caused the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're going to Denmark. I spoke at the Acres USA conference before our study was published. I told about the anecdotal information about the GMO, non-GMO effects on feeding hogs. I get a call from Ib Peterson, had a feeder pig operation in Denmark. He said, would it benefit me, and he was not feeding corn, because they don't raise corn there, he was feeding small grain. Would it benefit me to go non-GMO soy? And I said, absolutely. He said, well, it's gonna cost me 220 kroner per ton more. I said, it'll benefit you, do it. He did it, and he thanked me because he made more money. His death loss in sows improved, his scours disappeared, the scours in the pigs improved, the pigs per litter increased, the growth weight, everything was positive, but he was still having problems. Well, guess what? Along comes pre-harvest desiccation. All the small grain was being desiccated before it was harvested. He filled his grain bin once a year. That was ideal, because when he filled that grain bin, he got to take a composite sample, and he had that tested for glyphosate residue. The glyphosate residue was from 0.25 to 1.33 parts per million in the grain. He found up to 2.27 in the straw. But with this residue, he was getting these birth defects periodically. So he kept all these pigs. Some were born alive, some were born dead. He kept them all, put them, he used to euthanize some, but he froze them. And this is the example, the one in the next one here. In the top right, that's what he called the Christmas pig. It was born on Christmas Day. It was alive, it was born without front legs. It didn't live very long. And he froze all these. And he says, well, Howard, where do we go? Where do we go? Where do we go? Well, thank you for the contributions that Monica Kruger gave the world in her research on glyphosate. He took all these pigs to Monica, and she thawed them out, and she tested the different body parts for glyphosate residue. Okay, it was 0.24 to 1.13 and up to 2.27 parts per million. Well, how did we get 80 parts per million, 29 parts per million, 38, 6.4, 19.7, 7.7, and 80 parts per million? They tell us it doesn't bioaccumulate, and they wouldn't lie to us, would they? Again, Dr. Huber shared this slide, but it bears repeating. The work that she did to document the damaging effects of glyphosate residue in the digestive tract of dairy cows and chickens gave the world the answer to the questions like Dr. Tipp says. When I can't figure out anything else that might be causing the problem, I have to say, could it be glyphosate? She gave us the science to document what was going on. This is part of an article from a magazine in our country called The Milkweed that was written about the failure to thrive. It's been described as in dairy cattle. This cow has chronic botulism, just like Dr. Kruger documented was taking place as a result of the feedstuffs that were being fed to the dairy cows. Toxic co-infectious botulism. 1/10 of a part per million of glyphosate wipes out the lactobacillus, the Enterococcus fecalis, the bifidobacteria. Those are all your beneficials. So your E. coli has the ability to ramp up, and it just explodes and it includes on itself, and there's no help. It's like Dr. Huber mentioned the chronic diarrhea and the deaths that we've had in people. Okay, so we see this article, and as a result of our not being normal, we get information from a lot of different people that are capable to see what they're looking at and think outside the box. Well, one particular dairy nutritionist who was really keen and perceptive, one of his dairy customers had got cows that looked like this. And he says, we need to check the feeds for glyphosate residue. So he did. And this